Hi, how you doing? Welcome back to SuperCard Models. Today is an exciting one as I'm starting a brand new build series. The Gallardo is all finished. If you haven't watched any of the videos from that series, go ahead and take a quick look. But today I'm actually going to be starting the build on something a little bit different. I'm going to go JDM this time and build a Nissan Skyline R34 GTR. I love Skylines. I've owned a few Skylines, a few real Skylines myself over the years. I've never owned an R34. I think they're really, really cool. So yeah, I'm going to build one and I'm going to bring you all along for the journey. So if you've watched any of the videos from the Gallardo build series, basically what I did with that one was I just took a whole lot of archive, basically built up a whole bunch of archive kind of footage from the final assembly of that model. I didn't really involve you in the design and the kind of creative side of the process of how I built all the parts and designed the parts. This time what I'm going to be doing is bringing you along for every step of the process, and yeah, we'll design it and build it from scratch together. So it's going to be exciting. So there's a couple of things that I'm thinking I'm going to do a little bit differently to the Gallardo. So I might make the Skyline a little bit smaller, probably about 1/6 scale. The Gallardo is quarter scale, which kind of works because in real life the Gallardo is actually quite a small car. I think it's called Baby Lambo. It's kind of its nickname. If I made a quarter scale Skyline, probably take up most of the room on that table and just be a bit impractical, just difficult if I was going to make a few kits or something like that. It just gets a bit unwieldy. So I'm going to scale it down slightly, and I'm also going to just kind of scale down the amount of detail a little bit as well. So I think for the Skyline, I'm going to continue working with the same kind of materials that I did for the Gallardo build. So there's a handful of different boards and cards and foam board materials that I use that I really like working with. But what I want to do is maybe learn a bit of CAD and maybe 3D print certain components like the wheels and some of the interior details, etc. I've never done any of that before. I don't know how to use CAD and I've never 3D printed anything, so there'll be a whole lot to learn, and I'll bring you along for that journey as well. And maybe some of you can help me kind of learn that stuff as well. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to learning how to do that. Awesome. So yeah, let's find somewhere to start building a Skyline. Right, so when I built the Gallardo, there were two main techniques that I used to get all the sizes and the dimensions of all the parts that I needed. The first technique was that I bought this 1/18 scale die-cast model. This is actually an Auto Art brand model. And I would take my measuring caliper, this is called a vernier caliper, and let's say, for example, I wanted to build the roof panel. What I would do is I would take my caliper, measure the width of the roof panel, like that, and I would multiply that number by 4. And then I would take the length measurement, like that, and I would multiply that by 4. And that would give me the length and width, for example, of the roof panel that I needed for my model. And I would just draw that up in Illustrator and then print it out and cut it out on board. So yeah, pretty straightforward, pretty easy. And the results were pretty good. Okay, and so the other technique that I used was basically I saved a whole lot of photos, hundreds of photos of real Gallardos that I found online to my hard drive, and I used those as a reference. So actually basically what I did was I made separate folders for each individual component of a Gallardo. So a folder for the engine, a folder for the transmission, a folder for all the different body panels, so a folder for doors, a folder for the fenders, a folder for the rear guards, a folder for the engine cover, etc. And I would just save photos of real Gallardos to each of the individual folders. And then when I came to build a component, say for example the rear wing, I would just open all the photos that I'd saved of real Gallardo rear wings, and I would use those as a visual reference to make sure that what I was designing and building looked like the real thing. Because this model was pretty good, pretty accurate, pretty detailed, but I always wanted to make sure I was checking back and referencing against photos of the real car to make sure it was accurate. So I'll probably try and use the similar technique to that while I'm building the Skyline. Okay, so what I've done for the Skyline is I've actually bought this 1/24 scale Tamiya kit, plastic kit. This is just a V-spec. I'm probably going to build the Z-Tune version with the cool vented hood, body kit, etc. So I'll probably have to find some reference images of that online and kind of just use my eye to create the bits that this kit doesn't have. You'll see when I get around to building the bodywork. But this model should be good enough for supplying all the various dimensions and sizings that I need for all the parts. So yeah, I'll just take each measurement times each measurement by 4, and that should give me a 1/6 scale. Although what I just noticed, if I just take the lid off here, is that on the back of the instruction manual, Tamiya very conveniently give this diagram here, right? Which is actually just about kind of where to place the decals, but it's a really accurate, awesome like illustration of the side view and the front and the back view and the top view of the Skyline. So what I'm thinking is I might be able to scan and trace and vectorize and scale up that illustration and use that to inform all the sizing kind of information that I need for my build. So that's very, very different from what I did for the Gallardo build, but I think that might be a really good and useful and fast way to do things. So we'll see, we'll find out. Let's make a start and we'll see how we go. All right, it's the next night and it's time to actually start building something for the Skyline. And I think probably a good place to start is the chassis, or like the floor pan. The floor pan or the chassis was the first part that I built when I started the Gallardo build, and that seemed to work out pretty well. So let's do the same process for the Skyline. So I'm just going to Google what the wheelbase is for a full-size real R34 Skyline, and then I can just divide that measurement by 6, of course, and that will give me my 1/6 scale wheelbase measurement. And then I can use that measurement as my baseline kind of measurement to start building all the rest of the plans off, I think. And I'm going to use Adobe Illustrator and just draw all the plans for all the parts and that. So yeah, let's get started. So according to Google, the wheelbase measurement for a real R34 Skyline is 2,664 millimeters. So if I just divide that by 6, so that is going to be my wheelbase measurement for my model, for my 1/6 scale model. Cool, so now I can just jump straight into Illustrator and start setting up the plans file for my chassis parts. So, slight change of plans actually. I just calculated the width and length of a 1/6 scale model, and I think it might actually be a little bit too small. So I'm thinking now that I might actually scale up to 1/5 scale. So that's going to be not quite as big as the 1/4 scale Gallardo, but definitely just a bit bigger than the 1/6 scale that I was thinking. So yeah, it's a little bit hard to see on camera, but like the rulers here just kind of outline like the length and width that the model will be in 1/5 scale. And I think that's going to be much better than 1/6. 1/6 was just a bit too small. It was like kind of this big. I want to get big. If I wanted to build a small model, I'd just make my little Tamiya kit instead. And that's no good. No point in that. So yeah, 1/5 scale it is, I reckon. That just means that I need to modify my Illustrator file guides that I was just setting up for the wheelbase. So I'll recalculate what the wheelbase is in 1/5 scale, tweak my Illustrator file, and then after that I can start building parts. So let's do it. All right, great. So now I have a really good starting point, good foundation to work with my Illustrator file, plans file. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this little diagram that I mentioned earlier from the kit, and I'm going to scan that and then scale that up, import it into my Illustrator file, and yeah, use that to start taking measurements from, I think.
you.
So that guide image from Tamiya should actually provide most of the sizing information that I need for the chassis part. But what I'll also do is dive into this model kit and pull out the chassis part. There you go. And I might reference that a little bit as well to get some of the measurements that I need for the main chassis part. So yeah, let's start drawing it up. Okay, so it's time to cut that chassis piece out of the foam board. So this is pretty exciting. This is the first cut of the first piece on this build. I know it's not going to be perfect, like it's just the first iteration. And I'm going to do many tweaks and many iterations on every part that I make for this build. But for now, I'll cut it out and it'll give me a good place to start. So obviously it's too big to print out on my A4 printer in one piece. So I have to tile it out over multiple A4 pages, tape those together as accurately as I can, and I'll use that to trace out onto the foam board sheet and cut it out by hand. So let's get started on that process now. Cool, so there's that chassis part printed out from my A4 printer. It took like 6 pages to print the whole thing out at 100%, so like not scaled up or not scaled down. And what I did in my Illustrator file was actually add a couple of these red reference lines so that as the pages overlap, I can use those as a reference to get them all perfectly lined up in the right place relative to one another. So I keep a good stash of foam board out of my back room for projects like this. This is made by Quill and it's 5mm thick and it's quite a big sheet. So this is 500 by 770mm wide. Yeah, it's really good stuff. I like constructing, like doing the main kind of construction work with this stuff. It's kind of easy to cut and it's easy to glue and it's really easy to buy. Like I can just go down to my local office supply store and buy sheets of it there. So yeah, it's great stuff and I'll be using it a lot. So yeah, let's cut the chassis piece out from that. So yeah, there we go. That's the very first part of the Skyline build done and ready to go. Yeah, looks good. Should do the job. Well, I mean, it doesn't really look like much yet, but it's a good place to start anyway. What I'm thinking now, though, is I might make another one, cut another one that's exactly the same, and just glue the two together. And there's two main reasons for that. Firstly, this foam board gets a bit kind of like wavy and a bit bowed and kind of bent over time. I think it just kind of doesn't really respond to like the temperature in the room. Like if it gets hot and then it gets cold a few times, it just starts to get a bit wavy and a bit bowed. So if I glue two together that are identical, it'll just make them both nice and flat and smooth again, which is what I want as a good, solid, smooth, straight foundation for the car. And the other reason is it'll just make it like doubly strong, right? Like 2 layers is stronger than 1. So I'll go ahead and cut another one that's exactly the same now. And I won't film it because the process is exactly the same. So yeah, I'll see you shortly once I've made another one. There we go, I've just cut out the second one. All I'm going to do now is just cover one side of one of them with a whole bunch of PVA glue, kind of smooth out the glue to make sure it's nice and even and smooth. And yeah, put the other one on the top, position it so it's aligned like perfectly relative to the other one. And yeah, weigh it down with a bunch of books or something heavy, and yeah, we should be good to go. You can see how this foam board, like it's just, yeah, it's not very flat. So gluing the two together should solve that. All right, so hopefully that will weigh it down nice and flat while it dries. Fingers crossed. That's going to be a wrap for this video. We've made a really good start on the Skyline build. Thanks for checking it out. The next thing I'm going to do is start building all of the internal structural parts for the build. So that's going to be exciting because we'll see the form and the shape of the Skyline start to come together. So that'll be in the next week's video. So make sure you tune in to check out how that goes. And yeah, thanks for watching and see you then.